All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Derek Rosenbach, and I am the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, Program Manager for the Rocky Mountain region of the U.S. General Services Administration, commonly known as GSA. GSA would like to welcome you to this virtual public and stakeholder scoping meeting for the proposed implementation of energy conservation measures at the Denver Federal Center. GSA will prepare an environmental assessment, or EA, for the project in accordance with the requirements of NEPA. GSA will serve as the lead agency for the development of the EA. Thank you for taking the time to participate in tonight's virtual scoping meeting, and we welcome your feedback on the proposed project. If you require closed captioning, please click the Show Captions button on the bottom of your screen in Zoom. Tonight's meeting will include a presentation by GSA, followed by a question and answer session, or Q&A. Your microphones will remain muted during this time. You may post questions and comments in the Zoom Q&A box during the meeting. We've included a graphic on this slide that illustrates how to post a comment in the Q&A box on Zoom, which is in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Please only use the chat feature for requesting technical assistance. We'll also provide instructions on how to send additional comments to us towards the end of the meeting. Lastly, please note this meeting is being recorded and will be retained in the project's decision file. Attendees must accept being recorded to remain in the meeting. We'll be covering several topics tonight, including the NEPA planning process, the purpose and need for the project, preliminary project alternatives, and potentially affected resources at the Denver Federal Center. As mentioned previously, my name is Derek Rosenbach, and I'm managing the NEPA planning process for the proposed project. Clay Weiland, GSA's project manager for design and construction, is also presenting with me tonight. Fred Carey, senior project manager with Potomac Hudson Engineering and GSA subcontractor for NEPA, is also here with us tonight. Other GSA and Potomac Hudson staff are attending, but will not be presenting. We are currently in the public scoping period for the draft EA. Scoping refers to the involvement of interested individuals and key stakeholders early in the NEPA planning process on matters related to the proposed project. These matters include, but are not limited to, environmental issues that should be addressed, potential alternatives to the project, and sources of data that should be considered. The public scoping period will end on December 4th, 2023. At that time, GSA and the project team will likely move forward with the development of the draft EA. GSA plans to release the draft for public review for 30 days in March of 2024. A final EA will then be prepared to incorporate substantive public and stakeholder comments received on the draft. We encourage your comments on the analysis contained in both the draft and final EAs. In carrying out our responsibilities under NEPA, GSA is committed to ensuring we consider the overall quality of the environment. The public scoping period is an important opportunity for you to provide your comments to us on the proposed project in the very early stages of development. Scoping is also a means for you to provide input on natural, cultural, socioeconomic, and other resources in or near the project area. So, what exactly is the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, the acronym I've been using frequently? NEPA is a procedural law intended to ensure federal agencies, like GSA, consider the environmental impacts of their actions in the decision-making process. There are three general phases to NEPA planning. One, the development of a proposal, essentially where we are now. Two, an environmental analysis. And three, project implementation. Each of these phases often include public scoping or involvement. Furthermore, NEPA requires GSA to prepare an EA to consider whether a proposed action may result in significant impacts on the environment. If an EA determines that the project may result in significant impacts that cannot be avoided through mitigation measures, then a more rigorous analysis, such as an environmental impact statement, is conducted. If no significant impacts are identified, a finding of no significant impact is often issued. Generally, the finding of no significant impact is an agency's decision to implement a project. In addition to NEPA, compliance activities under Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act, and other applicable laws and regulations are being conducted concurrently. With respect to the National Historic Preservation Act, GSA must identify any historic or cultural resources the project would potentially affect and determine how the project can mitigate or avoid any adverse effects to those resources. As you'll hear momentarily, there are 2 historic buildings located on the Denver Federal Center. With respect to the Endangered Species Act, GSA must consult with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to ensure that the project would not jeopardize the continued existence of threatened or endangered species or result in the destruction or adverse modification of their critical habitat. I'll now turn the presentation over to Clay Weiland, GSA's project manager, who will provide the project overview, discuss the purpose of and need for action, and present the preliminary project alternatives that will be analyzed in the draft DA. Clay?
Thank you, Derek. The Denver Federal Center, or DFC, is located approximately 8 miles west of Denver, Colorado, along US Route 6 in the city of Lakewood. The DFC is a campus that encompasses approximately 570 acres and houses 6,000 federal employees from 30 different agencies, totaling 4 million square feet of rentable office space, office, laboratory, and warehouse space. Government operations began at the DFC in the 1940s, and the site has historically relied on energy that is generated from non-renewable sources, such as natural gas. The 2 historic buildings are located within the DFC. 2 historic buildings are located within the DFC. The Office of the Civil Defense Emergency Operations Center, or OCD, was built in 1961 and was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1999 for its association with the Cold War. The OCD was constructed as a temporary structure until a more permanent bunker could be completed. The OCD is partially buried underground. It is intended to provide protection in the event of a foreign attack. GSA is installed interpretive signage alongside the OCD to educate employees and visitors to the DFC of its historical significance. Building 710 is also built underground and is designed to withstand a blast. Constructed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and completed in 1969, Building 710 was a base for the Civil Defense Preparedness Agency. On August 2nd, 2000, the concrete and steel structure, largely concealed below an earthen berm, was listed on the National Register of Historic Places for its association with the Cold War. How its design and construction reflected on the era, and as well as its continuous national preparedness and response function. Next slide. The purpose and need the purpose of the proposed project is to decarbonize and electrify the DFC as much as possible, utilizing clean, on-site renewable energy generation and electrification solutions. To achieve this, GSA would install a solar photovoltaic, or PV, solar panel system, and thermal and geothermal heat pumps to provide year-round electric heating and cooling, and replace most natural gas-powered equipment. The proposed project is needed to meet the objectives of the GSA National Deep Energy Retrofit Program by cutting the grid purchased energy use by approximately 75% and water use by approximately 29% across the DFC. This project would also allow GSA to reduce its carbon footprint and become less dependent on non-renewable energy sources. The proposed project would further modernize infrastructure on the DFC, reduce life cycle operating costs, and mitigate risks associated with future fossil fuel price volatility. Let's transition to a discussion on the preliminary project alternatives that are currently under consideration. GSA conducted a preliminary assessment of the energy conservation measures included in the proposed alternatives. As mentioned previously, the primary goal of the proposed project is to decarbonize and electrify the DFC campus as much as possible. This would be accomplished through the use of ground-mounted solar PV system and a geothermal energy system. 2 action alternatives have been proposed thus far: a centralized option and a decentralized option. Under both action alternatives, the ground-mounted solar PV system would be in the location shown by the white line in the figure to your right. For the centralized alternative, one geothermal bore field of approximately 2,900 boreholes would be co-located with the ground-mounted solar PV system. The piping network, shown by the black and white hash line on the figure, would be circulated through a geotechnical screening process to minimize environmental impacts to soils and water resources. Disturbance to some existing parking lots and a few on-campus roadways would occur while construction of the pipeline network during construction of the pipeline network and while repaving some areas. The solar PV system for the decentralized alternative would be in the same location as a centralized alternative shown to the right. This alternative would use multiple geothermal bore fields located strategically across the DFC to minimize the piping distance to the buildings that they would support. The closer bore fields would also minimize the heat and pumping losses. Approximately 2,805 boreholes would be required and could be placed under existing parking lots, which would require demolition and repaving of the lots. Next slide. The solar PV system would provide up to 14 megawatts of new solar energy on the DFC. To achieve this, GSA proposes to install ground-mounted solar panels in the southeast quadrant of the campus adjacent to the corner of West Alameda Avenue and Kipling Street. The solar PV system would likely consist of bifacial solar modules installed onto a fixed tilt mounting system. This tilt would be 25 degrees facing due south. Up to 27 acres of already cleared land would be utilized. Next slide. The geothermal system would use underground closed loop heat pumps. These systems would circulate the water and propylene glycol solution through a high density plastic tubing that is buried in the ground. The borings for the closed loop system would be done by a state certified and licensed driller in accordance with Colorado state and international guidelines. Typical closed loop geothermal systems consist of 6-inch vertical or horizontal boreholes. Manifolds would connect the loops to the heat pumps. A heat exchanger would then transfer the heat between the refrigerant in the heat pump and the solution in the tubing. High density tubing would be hermetically sealed as per the American Society for Testing and Materials Standards and manufacturer specifications. A grout plug would be used to case the boreholes from the bottom to the top. The loops would be pressure tested before and after installation, and would be filled with potable water from the DFC's existing domestic water system. The system would not extract or come into contact with surface or groundwater. Aside from the potable water used to initially fill the loops, the system is non-consumptive of water resources over the long term. GSA is also assessing an alternative to take no action and therefore not construct the proposed project. Under the no action alternative, the solar PV system, geothermal system, and other energy conservation methods would not be built, and current energy conditions at the DFC would remain. Energy needs would continue to be purchased off the grid, which would be largely from non-renewable sources such as natural gas. I'll now turn the presentation back to Derek for a discussion of the resources that will be evaluated in the draft EA. Next slide.
Thank you very much, Clay. As part of the draft EA, GSA will analyze environmental and other resources within the project area, which includes providing a description of the affected environment or existing conditions on the DFC for each resource, as well as analyzing the potential impacts of project activities on those resources. The bullets on this slide summarize the preliminary resources anticipated to be analyzed in the draft EA. These include cultural resources, soils and geology, and transportation systems, to name a few. If you have suggestions for additional resources to be evaluated, please let us know in the Zoom Q&A box. The public scope and comment period will remain open until December 4th, 2023. Instructions for submitting comments during this period will be provided momentarily. Once all comments are received, the project team will review and incorporate substantive information as applicable into the EA. The draft EA release date is currently planned for March of 2024. A 30-day comment period will also be provided for the draft EA, after which the project team will again consider substantive public and stakeholder comments and then develop a final EA. A public review of the final EA and decision document is anticipated for release in late spring or early summer of 2024. Construction would be should we move forward with the project, construction would be anticipated to start in the fall of 2024 and last approximately 2 years. Again, the public scoping period is a great opportunity to comment on the proposed project and the potentially affected environment prior to preparation of the draft EA. There are several avenues for you to submit your comments to us. To provide written comments, you may physically or electronically mail them to GSA at the addresses listed here. We ask that you include the subject line DFC ESM's EA. To be considered in the development of the draft EA, written comments must be postmarked or received electronically by midnight of December 4th, 2023. Please note that all public comments received on the proposed project will be included in the project decision file. A copy of tonight's presentation will also be posted to the link shown on your screen. The links referenced throughout tonight's presentation have been entered into the Zoom chat box. GSA now invites you to participate during this Q&A session. Please submit your comments and questions in the Zoom Q&A box on your screen. As a reminder, please do not use the chat feature to submit comments or questions, as that feature is to be used for technical issues. GSA is happy to clarify anything that was discussed in the presentation with respect to the project itself, the NEPA process, our proposed alternatives, resources to be analyzed, or other opportunities for public participation. Any questions that are not answered tonight during the Q&A will be considered during the development of the draft EA. This now concludes the formal presentation.